Welcome everybody to the next episode of the Cannabis Review. I'm delighted to be joined in this episode by Cefyn Jones, who's the founder of Hemp Hound based in the UK. How are you keeping today, Cefyn?
I'm all good, Owen, and thank you for having me on, sir.
Delighted to have you on, mate. I've been following your LinkedIn posts and investigative journalism very closely, so it's delighted to be able to talk to you. Can you maybe give everybody a little quick overview of how you came to found the Hemp Hound and your position in the industry?
Yeah, of course. I started off with a CBD company in 2016 called Lovebud. Now, that didn't quite go to plan, but I did discover then that I was quite adept at finding out information, understanding what I needed to know and understanding who I needed to ask if I didn't understand. That actually sounds a bit weird, but that led to a job at the Cannabis Trades Association where I was member point of contact for 2.5 years, where I helped hundreds of companies on various matters. Now, that position came to a close at the end of 2020. The CTA evolved as an entity, but what they said that they didn't want, I decided to take and repackage and create effectively the Hemp Hound Agency, which is basically a signpost and an advisory service for first and foremost, as well as now delving into the world of investigative journalism and industry commentary.
Yeah, it's very interesting with the UK. It seems to be one of the territories that actually has the most disinformation if you're looking from the outside looking in. So it's great to be able to have somebody of your expertise and clarity to be able to bring to these topics. First topic I wanted to start off with is CBD in the UK. Again, lots of reports, positive and negative, that come out of the UK. Can you give us an exact overview of what does the CBD industry look like in the UK? Is it going well? Are the big major retailers still purchasing after the ruling that we saw recently based on the quantity of THC? How does it currently stand as you see it?
Well, novel foods has been a long, strangled affair, in my point of view. It's been filled with vagueness, and regulatory updates have been sporadic and slow. For example, with the ADI announcement recently, the 10 milligram advised daily intake that was followed by the ACMD recognition from the Home Office in regards to controlled cannabinoid levels. Now, one of the very interesting things in there is that no serving size is defined. It's accepted that there needs to be a serving size for all of these products, but in effect, that leaves us in an interesting scenario where we've got an advised daily intake, but no serving suggestions versus control cannabinoid content allowed per serving, with the Home Office saying, yeah, we need to sort out a serving, but the FSA have never thought about doing that. And if we go back in time to the present day, it has just been that case of kicking the can down the road in an attempt to basically strangle the hemp and CBD industry to, I feel, submission. In all honesty, I don't think there's people out there that want this industry here. And my fight, in essence, is to show that everyone has a right to be here, whether that be the small to medium-sized producers or your big boys. But at the end of the day, because of that slow, strangled effect, it's pretty much the same across the board. We are seeing companies close, but we are seeing companies who seem to be doing really well in the current climate. So it's a little bit paradoxical in that effect. But yeah, it is kind of holding a steady path, slightly going down, but we're hoping that basically the regulatory authorities will be a little bit more firm and sensible in their direction coming on from here. So hopefully we could be at the trough part, and there is that recognition that there should be a CBD industry here, and hopefully the industry regulators will provide a sensible route forward that benefits all companies. So yeah, it is low, but hopefully it's going to start playing it out now.
Are we in a scenario, and it seems to be in a couple of countries, where the CBD industry and cannabis industry was so new that the parameters and the rules weren't ever set, so it was kind of free for all, and anybody could get in and anybody could get an ingredient from anywhere in the world and put it onto the shelves? Are we just basically seeing now the the grown up part of this sector where it has to be regulated. There has to be certain licenses for ingredient suppliers, whether it's CBD or whatever cannabinoid it is, that everybody now has to obey these exact parameters. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to comfortably allow the population to take this. Is that kind of where we are, do you think, in the UK, that we're now getting to the stage, okay, the bad actors or the nefarious actors or the easy supply side of the industry is getting crushed, and the established and the more regulated large scale commercial operators are the ones that are going to end up being able to thrive in this space?
Yeah, I think there's like I said, a mixture of small and medium-sized companies and big companies that are doing well in the current climate. But when it comes to regulation, now there's always going to be companies that are going to try and circumvent regulation in any way. For example, there's wind coming out from the FSA that they're looking to target cold press hemp producers. Now, part of that involves the fact that people may or may not be using CBD isolate-based products misdescribed as cold press. Now, in that sense, you would think, yes, something definitely does need to be tackled there, because product misrepresentation to the consumer, that's obviously a big thing in this industry. But to what point is the regulation being a little bit over applied? If I go back to 2017, for example, when I first heard about novel foods, I was kind of confused, because in my eyes, if you had all the sensible lab reports, the cannabinoid profile, the mycotoxin, the fungicidal, herbicidal, all of them, you had your full lab reports for the finished product, traceability across the board, what's wrong with your products? But then your flip side is more required when it comes to the ultra refined isolate based products. Yes, I believe that is the case, but certainly with more whole plant products, I feel that there was sensible legislation or direction that was available at that time. But when it comes to the isolate products and that kind of understanding being applied across the board, then of course, where is that kind of sensible ground? Are we really looking at comparing CBD isolates to full spectrum products? It just seems a little bit skewed, and there needs to be that level ground where each product dynamic is accurately represented without having a cloud over it that comes from a different dynamic, if you know what I mean, kind of overshadowing the CBD content, the 10 mil ADI that came from lab reports for synthetic CBD and CBD isolate. So should a broad or a full spectrum product be stuck at 10 milligram per day? It just seems a little bit wrong. So yeah, there was sensible kind of guidance. I think it's got kind of over complicated now, but equally, from an FSA standpoint, you can kind of understand why they've applied that across the board, because it makes their life easy, but it makes the industry's life a little bit awkward. So yeah, is it an easy world? Is there the right level of regulation or requirements? Was that there before? I think that's a little bit of a hard question to answer, because in some aspects, yes, in other aspects, no.
Yeah, it's a very interesting sector, and as I said, still lots more evolving to happen there. Moving on now to a topic that I know you've done a lot of research and investigating about, is the GW Pharma and the Jazz Pharmaceuticals relationship. For everybody who doesn't know, Jazz Pharmaceuticals bought GW for 6.5 billion, I think it was, a number of years ago. 7.2. What have you found out in your course of investigations about the proprietary ownership of certain drugs, and was the transaction actually fully completed based on what you can see?
It's a bit of a hard question. I know there's an investigation at the moment in the US in regards to misrepresentation on GW Pharmaceuticals side when they were sold to Jazz. So there is a little bit of a uncertainty. I don't understand why that's not potentially being picked up here, if it's something that the US authorities deem is important. But when it comes to Jazz and GW, I believe that there's an agreement in place. That agreement became apparent in 1998 when the Home Office accepted a 22-point plan from Dr. Jeffrey Geyer, co-founder of GW, and that plan was to regulate and control cannabis in the UK. Now, is GW a separate entity? Still, I believe it is. You can trace them through company's house. If you go to Jazz Pharmaceuticals cannabinoid page, it is labeled for GW. There is an indication that Jazz in itself aren't happy with the way that their cannabinoid interests have progressed, and that they are looking potentially to sell it. But if they sell it, what would that be? Would that be GW that they're selling, or would it be their cannabinoid arm? So there is a little bit of uncertainty when someone says, oh yeah, Jazz brought GW. Yes, but in what context did they buy to assimilate them into their business model and work on, or are they keeping it as a separate entity, and why are they keeping them as a separate entity? I believe that that's because there's a public-private partnership at play. But certainly since 2021, when Jazz did buy GW, from that point working up to the 30th of November last year, every patent extension or new patent assigned to Epidiolex is awarded to GW Pharma Limited or GW Research Limited. And GW Research Limited on the 30th of November changed their name to Jazz Pharmaceuticals Research UK Limited, but at the same time, they're owned by GW Pharmaceuticals, and have been since the 6th of the 4th, 2016. This is all on Company's House, by the way. So there is uncertainty. Are they carrying on? If the patents are in their name, is it Jazz that submitted them, or is it GW that submitted them? And of course, is GW still its separate entity? I think it's plain to see at the end of the day. And it's quite understandable, because in a public-private partnership format, you've used public funds and resources to create an entity, most likely with a monopoly, right? So at some point in that contract, there has to be a return for the public. So public-private partnerships can be sold to companies, like Jazz was sold to GW. GW was sold to Jazz. So that needs to be kept separate to the point that it can be shown that they have achieved a certain area where the public can start seeing a return. But that's unfortunate, because that agreement comes with a 22-point to regulate and control cannabis in the UK. So petitions that get set up that are, buffed back because the government have no interest in talking about cannabis, that's because that 22-point plan. What we're seeing in the CBD industry, 16 lab reports from Epidiolex, unnamed but accounted for observers in the Center of Toxicity meetings that defined application requirements for CBD novel foods. They have their place, and their place is to become a world leader in medicinal CBD and cannabinoid-based products. So having a conversation about cannabis does not suit that agreement. Having a large and thriving CBD industry, that does not suit that agreement. But at some point, that agreement will get to a point where the public sees a return, and that'll be an interesting day.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be the drug discovery and development of formulations is the holy grail for a lot of these big companies, and anything that they can do to ensure that they can protect those long-term gains, I think, is what's in place at the moment. We're nearly at our time here now.
There is one issue there, though. When you look at it in a pharmaceutical sense and a single molecule kind of product, okay, but we're talking about cannabis and cannabinoids. We have an endocannabinoid system. So in essence, there's a fair argument to say that cannabis is a food before a medicine. Now, I believe that GW Pharmaceuticals and Jazz know that it's a food before a medicine. But what they're trying to do is clamp down on that so that their profits are maximized when your need becomes medicinal.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to watch this industry evolve and happen as we're kind of in the thick of it, and to see all these small little splinter things that are happening outside the main kind of consumer platform. Just before we go, for anybody who hasn't ever been to the hemphound.co.uk yet, or doesn't follow Kevin on LinkedIn, I highly, highly recommend it. One of the best sources of investigative journalism in the UK industry. For you, who are some of the other good voices in the UK that people should be following or listening to?
Okay, the Canna consultants, definitely, without a doubt. Stephen Oliver and Matt Lawson, excellent, excellent in what they do, as well as their interpretation on how the industry is evolving. I would also say Kyle Esplin, from the Scottish Hemp Association. He is a wealth of knowledge and enthusiasm for the plant as a whole. Without a doubt, he's definitely someone to keep an eye on. As for other people, I mean, forgive me, it doesn't matter who I think are awesome. Really, people should be keeping an eye on what's happening with the trade associations, because they should be the ideal source of information, right? I'm, of course, doing my investigative journalism. I'm not really too certain on what they're doing, but ultimately, they should be the ones that are relaying current information out to the industry. And I forgive me for saying it, if they're not doing it, then maybe there should be someone else about.
Yeah, I think that's the case across a lot of countries, mate. We're unfortunately stung with a lot of fairly good enough type of people, as opposed to people who are excelling within this industry and can understand the various perspective and nuances that are going to need to be applied across the various sectors of the cannabis industry as a whole.
Sorry?
It seems like that's going to be the case for sure.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
but you know, there are those people out there. Certainly, the cancer consultants, Kyle Esplin. I would say to an extent, there is some amazing academics out there. There's Dr. Ruth Fisher, as well as Dr. Jeff Cutter. They are in the US and and in Australia, respectively, but they offer different windows into how the world is evolving. Admittedly, those windows do tend to kind of show a repetitive angle, as it were. You know, anywhere that talks regulation tends to talk about it with GW lab reports. So you will see a lot of that, and obviously alternative takes on the way that the world is evolving.
Yeah. I'd definitely love to chat to you again in the next couple of months, and hopefully we both have updates on what's happening in Ireland and what's happening in the UK, and we can share information. But for now, Kevin, thank you very much for your time. It's very much appreciated.
No, great for being here. Thank you very much, Owen.
Not at all. Until next episode, everybody.